we get immediate reaction to Buffalo's latest effort from one Greg Cosell, senior producer from NFL Films, whose segment, as always, brought to you by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. Greg got into the office early to chop up this tape before taping that matchup show for ESPN. What dedication, Greg. We're humbled by your dedication.
Oh, yeah. Well, for you guys, Brownie, you know anything. I actually even stayed up and watched the whole game, which, for me, that's way past my bedtime. So not only did I watch the game on TV, I came in early so I could watch the tape.
Yeah. So let's begin with the offense. There were a lot of people that wanted to see some tempo changes to it, some hurry up. We saw that on the first drive, as a matter of fact, and spreading the field a lot more. Why don't we start here? Because we've talked about this on occasion. Spreading the field forces the defense to declare a little earlier, as we know. They can't disguise as well necessarily. And more often than not, it gives the quarterback easier reads to make, correct?
Yeah. The way I would talk about it last night is this. Here's what we don't know, and maybe I don't. Obviously, I'm not in the building. We don't know if what they did last night was meant solely for the Bills to get them going, or it was meant for the opponent, or a combination of both. And the reason I say what I said, Brownie, is this. When you go no huddle tempo against a team that has multiple pressure concepts, you totally minimize what they can do from a pressure standpoint. Because it shrinks your menu when you play against no huddle. When a defense plays against no huddle tempo, it shrinks their defensive menu. The calls can't be as extensive, and the other factor too is it also, when you're no huddle on offense, what the defense more than likely is going to be in, because they have to get into what they are going to be in,
right,
and they can't do as much pre-snap communication. So those two things are absolutely critical. It shrinks their menu as far as their pressure schemes, and we know Todd Bowles is a big pressure guy and very good at it. And it also forces them to sort of show their hand, as you suggested, and play what we often call default coverage, because we know what that coverage is going to be based on film study. So, it worked in many ways in both categories, because the Bills obviously needed some kind of little shove, as it were, to get their offense going. And this particular opponent, it worked effectively against this particular opponent.
Yeah, Bucs came into the game with the third highest blitz rate in the league at just over 40%, and they couldn't even change their personnel groupings because of the tempo as well. So that helped Josh with some easy declarations as well. And I want to tip my hat to Ken Dorsey, who doesn't get a lot of credit around these parts of late. It's the first time that I can remember, Greg, that I saw Gabe Davis run a quick slant. A lot of underneath routes for him, a lot of shorter routes with higher percentage throws, and look at the results. A career high for a single game, 9 receptions. There's a part of me that wonders, has Gabe Davis been hamstrung by the deeper routes on lower percentage throws that he has run for virtually his entire career in Buffalo after seeing what we saw last night? What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, that's a hard question to answer. Let's put it this way. Last night, Allen, on average, got the ball out of his hands in 2.3 seconds, which is the lowest in his career by a big margin. And by the way, lower than, let's say, Tua for this whole season. So, they made a commitment to getting the ball out quick. The RPO game was a major part of what they did. And I don't know if that was if that's a function of Gabe Davis per se, or if that's just, in a sense, part of the offense, what they chose to do. But obviously it was very, very effective. So there was not, other than Shakir, and by the way, I was really happy to see that. You know how I felt about Shakir coming out of Boise, that I thought he could be a really solid number 3 type receiver, and maybe he's going to sort of fall into that category now. But, it seems like that may be the case. But anyway, I think it all kind of went together. I don't think Gabe Davis is going to have 9 receptions every week. That's unlikely. But I think it all fit into sort of the plan and the approach. And I mean, that ball came out quick, whether it was RPO or just quick game throws. And the other thing that does too is when you play quick like that against defenses you feel very comfortable in understanding what they are, it really defines the reads and the throws. So, because I thought Josh looked really comfortable, he looked calculated. Even when he moved, I got the sense that the movement was more calculated as opposed to sort of random and, wondering what's going to happen. It just seemed like it was so much more controlled.
Yeah, and I think they might have run. I didn't get a tally on it, but they might have run more RPOs last night than they did all season so far.
Well,
It was a
unless
lot.
we charted on our end here, and unless we're wrong, maybe we're off by 1 or 2, but we charted 10.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely more than they had probably run in any other game this season, pretty easily. I felt like they moved. I mean, they moved Gabe Davis around, but we saw him in the slot.
Yep.
And getting to Shakir as well. I asked him this question after the game. It just seems like the best way to maximize Shakir is to get the ball in his hands as early in the down as possible because he is so good after the catch. And we saw that last night.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I loved about him coming out of college. Yes, and if you see, the thing is, if you're going to throw the ball short, you want to have players like that. You want to give guys an opportunity to run after catch. And Shakir he's probably the best guy on their roster as a receiver. Let's put Hardy aside for the moment. He's a little different kind of player. But of the sort of main receiver types, Shakir is clearly the best run after catch guy.
Right. And then I can't believe we got this far without mentioning the rookie tight end. One of the main reasons they drafted him was because of how sure-handed he is. He came into this game with the highest catch rate in the league, Greg, at 92.6%. And last night, catches 5 of the 7 targets, no drops, and one of his best receptions was the touchdown, which was clearly behind his body frame, and he just casually reaches back, pulls it in, and goes 22 yards for a touchdown.
Well, the catch I loved, I mean, taking nothing away from that one, of course, I loved the one where it was a second reaction movement play by Josh to his left, and you'll remember this, of course. And then Kincaid adjusted his route and went up the left sideline, and Josh threw it to him, and he caught it, and with both feet in bounds. You remember that one?
Yes, I think we might be looking at it here.
Yeah, I thought that was a great catch, just an unbelievable catch. So yeah, that's it. So
he makes it look so easy, though, Greg. It looks effortless.
I agree. Well, he's another guy I loved coming out of college. I thought he was we talked about that when he was drafted.
Right.
We said that, again, when I talk about comparisons, and we all do in the draft evaluation business, as it were, you're not necessarily saying a player is exactly the same player because people get they think that's what you're saying. I'm not saying that Dalton Kincaid's a first ballot Hall of Famer like Travis Kelce's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Right. But in terms of how he can be used within the context of an offense, how he can be deployed in much the same way.
All right, so let's talk about this offense going forward now. This approach worked very well against a blitz-heavy defense.
Correct.
Cincinnati is next on the docket. I'm encouraged by the way they utilized the middle of the field, which I was nervous about because Devin White, Levante David, Antoine Winfield, I mean, those guys are ball hawks. So I know they worked the perimeter early. I like the way they eventually got to the middle of the field a little bit more, not to any great degree. But do you think going forward, Kincaid and Shakir could potentially unlock the middle of the field more effectively for Buffalo's passing game?
My immediate answer to that would be yes. But you brought up a great point, Brownie. It's tough to know until they play their next game whether last night was more about Buffalo or more about the opponent they were playing. And it's tough to know the answer to that because the Bengals, not that they don't blitz at all. They do, obviously, but they're not the same kind of defense. So that's a hard question to know. What's really interesting is Josh only missed one throw last night, and it may well have been a touchdown. He overthrew Davis on his slant, And when I watched the tape and I saw how the safety reacted, I forget whether it was Winfield or Neal. It might have been Winfield. He might still be running if he had caught that, just because of the way the safety reacted. But the point I'm trying to make is, you just don't know. And the one thing that they still need to work toward, but I thought last night was a really strong step in the right direction. They still need to work toward more explosive plays in the pass game, because last night worked beautifully and they needed it. They needed Josh to feel comfortable. Obviously they ran him on the second play of the game with a designed run. They needed all that to happen last night. And my guess is they're still kicking themselves for not scoring again after the first drive of the third quarter. They probably should have thought they could have scored 40 last night.
Yeah.
But so they, in their mind, they're not going to come away saying, man, that was the perfect performance. They're going to be happy with some of the things they did tactically and execution wise. But I guarantee that in the building, they're going to think that there's still more to be done. They're still going to need to try to create more explosives in the pass game, because you can't count. I mean, as much as you want Shakir and Kincaid, and they're both good run after catch players, they can both take a short throw and turn it into something more. You've got to get the ball down the field at some point. And, they've struggled a little bit with that over the last month or so.
Right. And then with respect to how this team is going to win games going forward, it's still pretty clear to most of us anyway that this defense is not the same without the players that they lost. So in our eyes, the burden falls on the offense to keep their foot on the gas and keep scoring points, particularly against some of these teams that's coming up on the schedule, like Cincinnati, like Philadelphia, like Kansas City, even the Chargers. They're going to have to keep their foot on the gas and keep scoring points, because as long as they're up on the scoreboard, the healthiest part of Buffalo's defense, their pass rush, can go hunt the quarterback, because the other team's going to have to throw the ball to keep up.
And the pass rush, as I think you would agree, is going to have to be better. Now, Von Miller, I assume, is going to play more snaps going forward. He predominantly played in the dime last night. I assume he'll get more snaps, theoretically each week. But your point's a good one. I mean, the thing is the way they played last night, which had an efficiency and a calculation to it, is something that they do need to lean on, and then they need to expand that, because, as you said, the offense may have to carry them to some degree, and therefore you can't turn the ball over. And obviously the interception was fluky, so that wasn't a case of, oh my God, what's going on, but yes, they can't turn the ball over, because look, how many times did they punt last night and the ball went inside the 10-yard line? See, that's the other factor.
Yeah,
that's a key thing, is even if you're not scoring, but if you're not turning it over and you have to punt, look what happens then. You take the opposing offense might have to go 85, 90 yards. That's a tough deal.
Yeah, agreed. I would also say Von Miller looked his most, there was suddenness to his game, maybe for the first time this season. Almost had a sack. I mean, he had Mayfield's leg wrapped up, and he somehow managed to throw it away. He is a slippery quarterback. I got to give him credit, because he worked his way out of a couple of jams last night.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
The coverage, though, for the Bills defensively, I thought helped the pass rush at times. I know you said it probably still needs to be a little bit more effective and consistent in getting the quarterback on the ground, but just your thoughts maybe on Benford and Jackson in particular on the outside. And then I want to get to the dime defense in a second here, but just Benford and Jackson off the cuff here.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I thought that it was solid. I mean, obviously, they were not hurt badly. I think some of that's Baker. I think Baker did not play particularly well, but that's, but Bedford's the boundary corner, Jackson's the field corner. And, that's the way they played. I thought, like I said, they weren't really hurt by any big plays, because the Godwin 31-yarder, I forget when that occurred. I think it was in the second quarter. That was not really a function of either of the outside corners. That was a particular coverage where they asked Johnson to do something that he doesn't often do. But so they weren't really hurt by it. So I think those guys played well. But as I said, I think Baker, he kind of lacks clarity and vision in the pocket. And I think he gets stuck in the pocket a lot. That's not likely to happen with Joe Burrow. So it'll be a much different test in 9 days.
Bills used dime in this game. and Taylor Rapp comes onto the field in the 3 safety look. It allowed Poyer to play closer to the line of scrimmage. Poyer probably should have had a couple of interceptions in this game. Didn't come up with them.
Should have had a walk-in one in the fourth quarter. That would have put the game away.
That's right. So maybe just talk to me about what you believe the Bills are trying to achieve with that dime look.
I mean, I think, you're getting obviously another defensive back on the field. It allowed them to play a lot of split safety looks, which maybe they're not as comfortable playing, without playing dime. Again, I don't know. That's a Sean McDermott question. But whenever they played dime and they played 2 on the back end, as you said, Poyer was always down in as an underneath defender. He was not a back end safety. Rapp and Hyde were the back end safeties. They played some man coverage out of it. They played 3 snaps of 2-man coverage. All of it came in dime. So that's a coverage they probably don't really want to play unless they're in dime. So it gives them another option from a coverage perspective. There's reasons why you do it. Essentially when you play dime with 2 deep safeties, you're going to rush 4 for the most part. So we'll see. Again, that's another case where was that specific to the team they were playing, or is that going to be something that now becomes a meaningful part of what they do? They played 22 snaps a dime, Brownie. That's a lot of snaps a dime for them.
Yeah, even for them. And then finally, Greg Rousseau, we've seen kick inside before, but in the absence of Daquan Jones, we're seeing more of it in the last couple of weeks, and we saw it again last night. It's not like he's uncomfortable playing down in there. He did it at Miami. What are your thoughts about him there as an inside rusher, a player that long against a guard who usually has shorter arms? Like, he should win there, right?
And I would expect to see that more, especially as Von Miller gets more snaps, because I think Floyd, for the most part, has played well this year. I think you'd probably agree with that he's been a good player.
It's been great.
I think you'd want Floyd and Miller being on the edge, and Roos, you want your best pass rushers on the field in those situations. So third down, third and long. If you're going to rush 4 and play with dime, I think you would want Rousseau on the field, not off the field. And I think with Miller and Floyd playing well, you would pick Rousseau inside, and I think that's a good deal. And by the way, I think that'll be a really good deal against Cincinnati, so I would expect to see that.
Yeah. Greg, thanks as always. We appreciate it, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Looking forward to it, Brownie. Thanks so much.